Compositing two different photos is always a very popular topic inside of Photoshop, but I never really see anybody do it with wildlife photography. So I wanted to do this tutorial where we basically take these two photos where you have the owl sharp, but the moon's not sharp, and then you've got another photo where the moon is sharp, but the owl's not sharp, to take those two photos, put them together to create one composited image where you've got the sharp owl and the sharp moon behind it. My name is Matt Klaskowski, and this tutorial actually came up from me doing a one-on-one mentoring session with a friend of mine named Guy. And during that session, I saw these photos, and I thought it was such a creative idea. What he did is he set his camera up on a tripod to take a picture of an owl that had the moon behind it. Okay, there was a rising or setting moon, and he's got the moon behind it. The problem is if you're focused on the owl and its foreground, depth of field will never allow you to get that moon or even clouds or whatever it is behind it in focus. So what he did is he left the camera there, and then he focused on the moon and took another photo, and we're able to combine those two photos inside of Photoshop to bring the sharp photo of the owl and the sharp photo of the moon, put them together and make it into one image. Let's go ahead and get started. So I have both photos open inside of Lightroom. You could just as easily do this from Camera Raw. Our only goal is to match the photos pretty close and then get them over into Photoshop in layers. Okay, so however you get there, it doesn't matter. You can see we've got the in focus owl and the out of focus moon, and then the out of focus or the in focus moon and out of focus foreground. So everything looks pretty matched to me. Overall exposure, everything is pretty close. One thing I would say would be this sky looks a little bit more vibrant than this sky. So what we can do is use a little trick here. I'm going to take the white balance eyedropper in the basic panel, hover it over an area in the sky, and just look at the percentages. So 44, 48, 63. So 44, 48, 63. Blue should remain close to the same in the other one, but those first two are a little bit off. So 44, 48, 63. Go to this photo, hover over. You can see 48, 52, 64. So blue is pretty close, but the red and the green are not. So what we can do is go down to our HSL and just boost that blue a little bit and see if we can get closer to 44, 48-ish. 42, 46, 50, somewhere around there. Let's go a little bit higher. 45, 50, we're getting closer, okay? You can spend a little bit of time on this one, and again, just try to get that closer. That's actually pretty much dead on to what the other one was. That'll just help our job a little bit when we put these together, okay? So at this point, again, if you have to match any exposure, you can try to work with those two, but what we want to do is click one, shift click on the other one to get both of these targeted. We're going to go to Photo, Edit In, and we're going to choose Open as Layers in Photoshop. Again, if you went the Camera Raw route and you open those two, you would have to open them separately and then just layer them on top of each other inside of Photoshop. Okay, our whole goal is to get them both into the same document. And once we're there, you can see in this case, Lightroom put the sharp version at the bottom. Just personal preference. I like it on the top. It just makes it easier for me to visualize things with the sharp version at the top. We're going to add a layer mask. You can do it either way. There's no rule to that, but I like the sharp version on top. Next thing, if we shift click to select both of these layers in the layers panel here, we could do auto align. And auto align would help align these two layers because you can see they're not aligned. That doesn't work here. There's too much of a difference between the two. I gave it a try. So we have to go the old-fashioned route, use the opacity adjustment, then take your move tool and just move the owl into place. Right around there. Okay. And then just bring that opacity back up to 100%. And at this point, if you wanted, you could go ahead and crop out that excess area. We're not going to need it from here on out. All right, next thing, we need to start working with a little bit of a selection. So let's go to Select Subject, gets a rough selection around the owl, and then we'll go to Select and Mask. And we're just going to use, there's a little brush in here, the Refine Edge brush. All we need to do, I just want to get some of the edges of the owl in there. It's not too bad, but Command or Control Plus to zoom in. You can see the edges aren't quite perfect. So this will help just by brushing along some of those edges inside of there. Maybe a little bit on this side as well. And when you're done with that, just click OK. So now you'll have a selection inside of there. It's just a little bit more refined than when we went in there with. Now from here, so what do we have? We have the owl selected. Okay, I want to add a layer mask to this layer. And the way layer masks work is what's selected stays, what's not selected goes away. So if I just click on this layer mask, what happens? What's selected stayed, everything else went away, and it showed us the layer underneath, which is the blurry layer. It's only got the sharp moon in it. So that's the way selections and masks work. So that makes it a little bit easier to visualize what you're about to do. This is a great time for a very quick 60-second word from our sponsor. I promise I'll keep it quick. If you are into wildlife photography, I've got a course called Wildlife Editing Secrets. It's a topic I find a lot of people don't talk about, even though wildlife photography is actually one of the biggest photo genres that's out there. So I put together an entire course to talk about all the areas around editing those photos. So if you were to look at the webpage, we talk about getting it sharp. We talk about removing distractions is a huge part, understanding noise reduction, uncluttering your backgrounds, even getting interesting where we can replace a sky behind things. And especially a lot of times when you have a really bright sky and a dark bird, I talk about those situations. And then also how to just get very creative with it too. If you want to go beyond just strict technical edits to the photo and you want to get a little bit more creative with it, I'll cover all those things as well. So you can find out more over on the website. I hope you'll swing by and take a look. Okay, now we are back, and we had just left off where we added the mask to the layer. Remember, we had the owl selected, and all I did was click the layer mask, and because the way layers and masks work, what's selected stays, which was the sharp owl. Everything else goes away and shows us whatever was underneath, which is the blurry foreground. Okay. At this point, the first thing that I would do is let's just clean up the foreground because we need to bring the sharp foreground back into it. And then we do have a little bit of a glow around the owl. All right. I'm going to show you how to get rid of that. I'm going to show you why it happened. I'm going to show you how to get rid of it in just a second here. But let's click that mask. And you can paint with black and white on the mask. How do you know which one? Try white. If it doesn't work, try black. You got a 50-50 shot. I use a big, large feathered brush, and I'm just going to paint through here. Bring in all of those areas. Hit the left bracket key. I can make it a little bit smaller and paint the rest of it in. All right. And missed a little area there. You can always just look at the mask to see if you missed any spots while you're doing it. So that looks pretty good for the foreground. The only problem we have now is this glow that we have around the owl. Let me Command or Control plus to zoom in. You can see it there. So why does that glow happen? That glow happens because the out of focus image will appear like the owl's larger. Okay, those soft edges will expand out beyond the owl. Guy is a wonderful photographer, and so I know what he did. And the only thing that I would say is if you wanted to make this process a little bit easier for you on the editing side of things, it would be try to shoot the photo without the owl there. Now, I don't know what happened when he was there. Maybe the owl didn't move, maybe the moon moved too much, whatever that happens to be. But if you could have shot a picture without the owl there, this process would have been a little bit simpler because we wouldn't have that glow. Now that we do have the glow, an easy way to get rid of it is just fake it a little bit. We're going to go to Edit Free Transform, and I'll Command or Control minus to zoom out so you can see what I'm looking at here. I just grab the handle, make it a little bit larger. All right, maybe a little bit smaller than that, but somewhere around there. You're just going to try to position this. Try to position that so you cover any of the glow in there. It'll just make the whole process a little bit simpler. I'm not going to say that that's going to work all the time because every photo is going to be different from this. All the edges are going to be different. Your selections are going to be different. The one thing that I could say is you could go with a little bit of cloning and healing and just try to clean up some of that. If you could go that route, just use some of those tools if there's any edges in there that you had to fix. But in this case, I think just enlarging the owl just by a little bit just covered up all that area and made the process a lot simpler. And then from there, all we got to do is just hit File, Save. And that will take us from Photoshop. And as we can flip back over here to Lightroom, you can see it just brought it in with your other photos. And at this point, I always tell people you can do micro adjustments there. There's nothing wrong with doing some editing in Lightroom once both of those photos are combined. Also, if you're interested, if you're watching this, you're probably into wildlife photography. And I've got a fun video. It's free. It's right here to watch on a situation where I had a bird that was sitting still, but its feathers were getting blown by the wind. And I was able to use a long shutter speed, which is not something that you use a lot in wildlife photography, to create a very different and I think very interesting and shareable photo. So if you're looking for something else to watch, that's a great place to go next.